Hello and welcome to the Natural Selection Podcast, the conservation podcast brought to you by the University of Exeter's Bioscience Masters students. Today will be the first of a two-part episode and is brought to you by the Conservation Science and Policy course. Your hosts today are myself, Emily Stevenson,
Tristian, Herbert and
Deborah, Kornblut.
In early January, the Bioscience Masters students went on a field course to Kenya and we saw some really incredible wildlife, including leopards, the critically endangered black rhino, and even an alpine elephant.
For the naturalists out there, alpine elephants are savanna elephants at high altitudes.
During our 2 weeks, we travelled across the southwest of Kenya, from the grassland plains of the Masai Mara to the lush forests of the Aberdares, and along the way, we met with a wide range of inspiring conservationists. From them, we learned about the complex nature of conservation in Kenya and what steps can be taken to protect its wildlife.
In fact, we met one such conservationist in our first few days of arrival, while staying just outside Nairobi National Park.
This episode, A Lifetime at the Kenya Wildlife Service, captures that conversation. We hope you enjoy it.
So, Paul, we absolutely loved your talk. Thank you so much for coming to see us. If you could, just introduce yourself and then tell us a bit about why you started what you do.
My name is Paul Gathitu Masela. I work for Kenya Wildlife Service. I've been doing so for the last 32 years. And wildlife was always something that was interesting. It came to me while I was in school and we visited one of the parks called Nakuru. And seeing all those flamingos between 1.5 and 2 million. But at that time, we just saw pink everywhere. And I thought this was really exciting. And we went to this crater, a huge crater, that to me explained nature. Endless. You throw a stone, you think you're going to hit the ground, nothing would happen. So that really excited me. And when we got to secondary school, I joined the wildlife clubs of Kenya. And this is the one that really took me around. They showed us the parks, they showed us wildlife. So it reinforced that natural feeling that I had. And I thought that this was really, truly the area that I was meant to be in. So it was not a surprise to me when I realized that I had so much interest that I actually inquired whether they trained. And I remember the first time I went to the office of the former Kenya Wildlife Service and I said I wanted to work for wildlife. And the senior officer looked at me and said, "Do you want to work for wildlife?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And he asked me, "Young man, have you ever been chased by a buffalo?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Go back, get chased by a buffalo, then come and tell us you want to work for wildlife." So I think he meant it's a dangerous job, so it's not just for the people who are just passing by and enjoying. It's hard work. And I still remember that man, and I still remember the work because the training was very hard. The training really was hard. And we were trained to walk across the park with just a GPS, no guns, a lot of wildlife. We were trained to go and do serious swimming in the ocean just to prepare us because we didn't know if you were posted, what warden would you be? Is it for a city park? Is it for a park with forests? Is it for a marine park? So it was all rounded. So 3 years was worthwhile.
And rewarding.
Very rewarding, especially now.
Did you ever get chased by the buffalo?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, but he had retired, so I didn't have opportunity to go and tell him I had been chased. But yes, I remember the first piece of work I had to do was to establish the number of rhinos in northern part of Aberdares National Park. And because we didn't have any data, it was just once in a while somewhere and you say, "Oh, I've seen a rhino." And I was told to go and establish how many there were, where they were. And I walked that area for 1 year. And that's why we used to get chased by buffaloes, elephants. Because you come up and they use natural history. They're very sensitive. They know. They can tell if you're upwind or downwind. So every now and then we'd bump into them without taking into account, are we going upwind or are we going downwind? And suddenly they would get very curly. So they would chase us. Yes, that did happen in the field.
But you made it out alive.
Somehow made it out alive. We climbed trees. There's a tree in Savo called Delonix. It's huge. You can't quite get your hands around it. It's very smooth. But many times we would find ourselves up the tree, and coming down would be a problem because there was nowhere to hold. So then they ask you, how did you get up there? And I say, somehow, when danger looms, you're able to get up. I remember in Lake Nakuru National Park, we used to go for a lot of field work. And again, you're following, and your job is just to stay with the animal, study its behavior, meaning you just follow it. If it jumps up, and you say, okay, from this time to this time, it was jumping up. But then every now and then they'll go into some bush, and you didn't know what was beyond them. Buffaloes, then lions. So many times even lions would come across and would have to walk backwards. The secret, if you are meeting or facing a lion, don't look it straight in the eye, because in their social structure, that is a challenge. So you move back, you face it, but don't look directly in the eyes. So you just walk backwards and they will let you go. They're not bothered.
So over the past hour or so, you kind of gave us a massive history lesson about the KWS and conservation in Kenya, which was absolutely fascinating. But for our listeners who might not have as much time, could you give a kind of a brief overview of where the Kenyan Wildlife Service was and sort of where it is now?
Yeah, I think Kenyans are very lucky in the sense that we've always grown with wildlife. In fact, at some point, we are accused of taking our wildlife for granted. It might be true. It's just that we thought it will always be here. But I think a lot of development that has come has put a lot of pressure on the wildlife. And we have seen mega projects that they're taking the same space that wildlife has. We know that a lot of parks were set up, but we didn't use a lot of science that time. So maybe there could be more spaces that would have been carved out and even gazetted for parks. But that is past time. So that is the reason why the wildlife to continue existing, we really need the communities to be able to own this wildlife and then give them a place in their areas. So I'm glad to say that the Kenya Wildlife Conservancies Association is a new creation that was created over long periods with discussions with KWS. They now are an autonomy. They are focusing on ensuring that there is capacity within communities to manage wildlife. So many communities have now formed conservancies. They are still keeping their livestock. They are still growing their little vegetables behind their houses, but they've left the bigger parts for wildlife. So that is what now makes the future still look bright, even though we've lost quite a bit of land, particularly when you look at the migratory and dispersal areas over time. And obviously with human population increasing, it means that we are competing for that same space. Humans, I think we are adaptable, so we should be a little more sympathetic with wildlife. We can build skyscrapers and live on top of each other. But if you ask an elephant, I doubt they would live on top of each other in some constructed buildings. So I think it's time to make sure that we let the wildlife continue to exist. And I'm glad that the communities are on board and they have shown a lot of resilience and they have shown a lot of love for the wildlife. So it will be for policymakers to make sure that the areas that are best suited for wildlife are left for wildlife.
From everything you've seen, do you think these changes will happen, and are you optimistic for the future?
Yeah, I know that we certainly will lose a lot of habitat. We are losing wildlife itself in big numbers, but the realization that wildlife has to exist for the future is the one that will call us to action. And the action is to make sure that wildlife continues to thrive, because we actually don't have a choice. It was created by God, we believe, just like we were created by God. And there is no reason why we should propagate and move or grow to a point where we actually decimate wildlife. We should learn to coexist.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today and also coming to see our group and telling us all about the fantastic stuff that you've been doing. Just one final question to finish. You must have seen some of the most amazing wildlife that this planet has to offer. If you could be any animal on the planet, what would you be?
That would be the rhino. The rhino has a routine. It has a specific place where it goes to sleep, where it feeds. It seems to even be organized about how it drops it down. it's not everywhere. It goes into specific parts which you could call toilets. So the rhino seems to be very organized in that sense. And also it's very sensitive in terms of the fact that it's myopic. It doesn't see very well. So it really is on the survival path. It believes anything that makes a move that is not clear must be a threat. And that's why we've had stories of rhinos, running straight into people because they think that they are a threat. We have heard of rhinos fighting fires because they think, this fire, why is it in my area? And they're so routine, they just want to just get on with life. And that's why I would like to be a rhino.
That's awesome. Thank you so much again for taking the time to chat with us and for sharing your insights with other listeners.
Asante sana. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us in the first part of our Kenya episode of the Natural Selection podcast. Join us next time as we talk to Ali Skeets, Programme Manager at Cool Earth, an inspiring organisation working to protect rainforests worldwide.